Welcome to Stop, Shop and Scroll. Some of you may be aware that the Stop, Shop and Scroll moniker sounds a little bit like Stop, Drop and Roll. That's very deliberate. It was a piece of 90s government advice for children to let them know what they needed to do if they just so happened to be on fire. One thing that we do know that has been on fire in the last 18 months is social commerce. I apologise for the cheese joke. And so we thought, what better time than to talk about it in our latest event. Now, what do I mean by it being on fire? Well, we know, and we talked about this in some previous events about a year ago, that with the onset of the pandemic, social commerce exploded last year. But despite the pandemic abating, shops being open in most of Western Europe and particularly in the UK and the rest of the Western world, we continue to see retail sales dropping and online sales growing. Now, outside of just the pandemic effects, we know that there's other factors driving this, including improved technology, basket integrations, we've got Shopify integrations, we've got new platforms coming into the market, particularly things like TikTok's e-commerce offering has exploded and really changed in the last couple of months. All these things are helping. But we also know that we've got Black Friday around the corner as well. So when we were sitting down and having to think about what we wanted to do some analysis on and talk to the masses about, we thought what better than to put together some of our thinking on the latest trends, insights going on social commerce. So today's session, we're going to cover off what those macro trends look like, what that means from a behavioural shift perspective, how we see behaviour changing on the platforms, and most importantly for you guys, what the social implications of that are. What does that mean for brands, and what can we do to capitalise on it? Now, for those of you that haven't been to a Born Social event before, we are Born Social. We're a global social media agency, and we help the brands of tomorrow harness the chaos of social media. And our panel today and team joining you outside of myself, I am Ed, Head of New Business and Marketing, is going to be Essie and Emily, our Head of Strategy and our Senior Strategist. And luckily for you guys, they're going to be doing a lot more talking than me on the content. But before I hand over to them, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please do send your questions in the Q&A or drop them in the chat. We're going to try and run to something like 30-35 minutes. We want to have a hard stop at 45. We want to give everyone the opportunity to go away, have their coffees and get ready for their 11 a.m. / whatever the next hour is meetings, wherever you are on the globe. So please do drop your questions in. I'll field them through the session and we'll try and have 5-10 minutes at the end to cover the questions. But otherwise, without further ado, I will hand over to Essie to kick us off.
Thank you very much, Ed. I thoroughly enjoyed that small talk for the first 5 minutes. It's definitely a skill. But as Ed mentioned in terms of the agenda today, so there's kind of two parts to this story. So in kind of true strategist manner, we'll first explore what's happened around us from those three perspectives that Ed mentioned. So the macro view, the behavioral shifts, and then social implications. And then we'll look to develop a better understanding of how brands should adapt to them. So hopefully you should come away with some really actionable takeaways off the back of this as well. And just gonna get us started, as we've got quite a lot to cover in the next 30 minutes or so. So heading straight into part one. So how has the retail landscape evolved? Now, I will try to limit my use of the C word, COVID, but a mention or two might be inevitable as we kind of run through this first section. So I do apologize in advance. Just so you know, this first section is slightly more conceptual, so we'll get to those kind of brand examples in part two, so please bear with us. So as mentioned, first looking at the kind of ever evolving retail landscape as a whole, and we're considering it from three angles. So firstly, looking at the kind of macro movements in terms of the UK and the global retail economy and how the internet has transformed to support shopping as a whole. Secondly, looking at those behavioral shifts that we've observed and found particularly interesting as a result of that. And then finally, what all of this means for social media. So I'm going to take us through the macro movements, and I'm going to hand over to Emily to look at the behavioral stuff, and then I'll come back to look at the social implications before we head on to part 2. But firstly, macro movements, trying not to state the obvious here. You know, I know we've all read a lot about the state of the retail industry over the last couple of months in particular, but I think it's important to consider kind of what's led to our current situation and what does that landscape look like as a whole. So first, just looking at the big picture of retail in the UK, so both offline and online sales in this graph. So this is from the Office for National Statistics, and it's relatively new data. So what it tells us is that the UK retail sales fell actually for the 5th month in a row in September, with people spending less money in shops, kind of despite the COVID restrictions obviously easing earlier in summer already. So it seems that while this kind of vaccine rollout is gaining momentum, the consumer confidence to actually go and shop in store remains still relatively cautious. However, I think it's important to note here that that is very much category specific. So household goods were actually the main driver of this month's decline, or of September's decline, with a fall of nearly 10%, while then food and kind of grocery sales ticked back up. And I think what's particularly interesting for us to note here is that the proportion of online sales rose to 28.1% of total retail sales, which is a 0.2% increase from August. So online going strong. And as mentioned, the picture looks very different in different categories. So I think it's useful to kind of get an understanding of those differences. So while obviously the high street has reopened, you know, there hasn't really been this miraculous, I guess, return to in-store shopping in all categories. So the headline here when looking at these two graphs is that the growth of online shopping has been sustained past COVID, which is seen here through those blue lines on the right-hand side in comparison to when looking at the picture in November 2019, for example. So both of the graphs here examine those online sales as a proportion of all retailing. And on the left, we have it for clothing and footwear. And on the right, it's for non-specialized stores. So looking at supermarkets or department stores, for example. And for clothing, the increase of online shopping is really significant, but it's even more so for these non-specialized stores. So we're looking at nearly 30% of online sales as a portion of those total retail sales when you look at the kind of blue line on the right-hand side there, which is obviously a huge kind of opportunity to leverage this growth audience who now shop online, if then also maintaining those in-store shoppers who we know are still very much there as well. And when it comes to retail, I think it's always important to look to the East, particularly China, because e-commerce, we know there has been thriving for a long time. And what we've seen in the last year is that social commerce in particular, so those transactions that are completely completed on social platforms, have been significantly increasing. So 30% of the Chinese population shopped via social, which is absolutely massive when you think of those numbers. So social has really become a staple of shopping there. I think it's really interesting when we consider the role that the internet as a whole has played in shopping a very short while back. So I came across this quote from a Future of Mobile report by Andreessen Horowitz, and it was done in 2016. And it says that the internet lets you buy, but it doesn't let you shop. And what they meant with it is that e-commerce and shopping online is better at the logistics and the act of selling rather than demand generation and the act of kind of creating intrigue and nudging people forward in their purchasing journey. And I think it's really interesting because in 5 years' time, so now in 2021, this has pretty much been completely reversed. So we're now both able to, and I think much more comfortable shopping online from a behavioral perspective as well. So we're now so used to kind of completing that entire shopping journey on the internet. And I think to the extent that when we think about online shopping and our behaviors around that, so not just buying, but actually shopping, it has become a bit of a form of escapism, particularly over the last 12, 18 months. And the kind of idea and concept of retail therapy, as we know it, has kind of given way to online shopping as a form of distraction from your problems, as we can see from these two lovely tweets here. So online shopping is certainly not just about buying anymore. It's not just about that one transaction. It's about everything that goes with it. And I think this example here illustrates it really well. So this is a piece of kind of creator content that was posted on YouTube. It's got 15K views, where an influencer browses through the Primark website, narrating what she would like to buy and kind of running through the different items on the website, which ones she likes and which ones she doesn't. And Primark is one of our clients, and we very well know that they do not actually sell anything online. So she's not buying anything. So she's just letting her followers to kind of come on this browse with her, which I think is just such an interesting phenomenon. And as I said, 15,000 people have, watched this video and gone through this shopping journey with her, which I just think is quite amazing, really. So wrapping up those two things, so those two, I guess, key macro movements that we wanted to focus on. So yes, online shopping continues its growth post-COVID, but equally the internet in 2021 is simply not just geared towards buying, but also that browsing behavior. Which leads us very nicely to this next section, which is around those couple of key behavioral shifts, and I will hand over to Emily to talk us through that.
Lovely, thanks, Essie. So as we've been through those kind of macro movements, what are the behavioural shifts that we're seeing from audiences when it comes to shopping? So I've got a couple of key focuses to touch on here. So as we've just said, we've seen that in-person retail is decreasing and online is taking kind of ever bigger slice of that pie. But the behavior behind this is really around that change in mindset in terms of that act of shopping. Kind of our habits and why we might be heading out to the shops is starting to change. And as we've just been saying, that act of browsing is not kind of the overarching reason that we are going anymore. As this quote here shows, it's much more about running to the shops, grabbing something and coming back out again, kind of getting in, getting out, that kind of idea, which is a very different dynamic to what it used to be. So we no longer really need to make that active decision to go shopping. It is all there in our hand. Our behaviours are moving towards that always on kind of browsing behaviour. And just because shops have started opening again, it doesn't mean we're going to kind of revert to what our behaviour was previously. As we know, this kind of always on browsing behaviour, this kind of mobile shopping, online shopping is something that has embedded over the last 2 years. And we see as continuing to be that trend. So, and this active kind of how we browse is a really interesting one. So I've picked out second screening here as a really good example of how we are actually shopping whilst we're not actually kind of doing that as our primary activity. There's loads of stats on kind of how prevalent second screening is. There's a couple here, one from YouGov showing just how kind of global this behaviour is, and then GWI here saying, well, second screening, 63% say they're using social, 38% are saying they're browsing for products. But probably the best reflection of this is the fact that probably everybody on this call right now has second screened recently or does it regularly. I think it's something that very much kind of rings true. But I think the overarching kind of theme here is that shopping is no longer just an active activity. It's one that we do quite passively as well. Whether we're digesting posts on social, we might see something that catches our eye, we might be saving for later, we might be sharing with a friend, or we might just be, idly scrolling through, sales that pop up or like promoted ads that we see that we think, oh, that might be interesting, whilst we're actually doing something else as well. So really this reflects that we are in that always on shopping mode. So even whilst we're technically doing something else, we are still shopping. So this is our first real behaviour shift. We've definitely moved from that mentality of going shopping, carving out that time specifically for that activity, to actually being in that always on mentality where shopping is kind of present throughout our day within those little pockets of time where we might be doing something else as well. And we know that, as mobile experiences have become increasingly seamless, shopping is getting further integrated and embedded into our daily lives. We're kind of doing it without realizing almost. And we're often in that kind of quite passive browsing mode as well. And this really does reflect how that sort of shopping landscape is evolving and changing and becoming more dynamic as well. how sort of shopping is showing up is becoming ever more diverse. This diagram really shows all the places that shopping now lives. You've got the kind of classic brands in there as well, you know, Amazon, Facebook, etc. But you've also got secondary marketplaces like Depop, ThredUp, Poshmark, and looking at how, you know, creators at that top level are kind of driving that too. It's not just brand to person anymore, it's actually person to person. There's a lot kind of more dynamic relationship there now. And it's not just being driven by brands as well, it's being driven by users, creators, products themselves. You know, people are reselling, reimagining, people building their own brands through their style and building their own community in that way. And these are things that are only really possible through digital and social. We know that this also emphasizes that individual taste and style kind of over just overarching brands. And, you know, we tend to be buying, you know, a creator or an influencer's look. How can we make that a reality for ourselves? Not necessarily a particular brand within it. And we know that the easiest place to search for what we're looking for isn't in a physical store, it's through social or online. And this actually is what's driving trends ever faster too. So the definition of where trends are coming from and what's driving that kind of shopping demand is growing ever wider. So absolutely love these stats here from List. You've got Succession at the top, the fashion in that TV show actually driving really tangible searches for, you know, people, how are people going to be able to recreate this look themselves? And also Prince William at the bottom there, wearing this velvet blazer, people love that, immediately started searching for it, showed a definite uptick in, you know, demand and kind of search interest for that. So this shows, you know, with shopping at our fingertips, we are ever quicker to hunt down what we want. And if we're second screening, I would be pretty confident that a lot of these searches, you know, would be whilst people are actually watching Succession, we see something we want to buy, we're immediately going to be searching for it and then scrolling through the brands that can offer us those kind of products right there and then. And as these stats show, this is key moments in TV culture, pop culture, that is driving sales in a really, really clear way. So what's the impact of this when it comes to our behavior? We can see that really trends are coming from so many more places now. It means that they're just moving ever faster. It's almost impossible to keep up. Having so many taste curators, influencers on what you're looking to buy, what people are looking to, you know, purchase and have in their wardrobe particularly, inevitably results in quicker trend cycles. People get bored, see something new, move on to that next look. And, you know, from this, we know that more agility, more reactivity is required from retailers to respond and really keep up with this, this kind of ever-moving kind of cycle. And we know as well, there's no single culture, there's no one single input driving this, there's many. It's that constant flywheel of new trends picking up, old trends dying or being reimagined. And this is all fueled by our always on browsing behavior as well. So our second behavioral shift is this. We're moving from getting our trends and inspiration for purchases from just brands to actually looking to many more sources. It's definitely been democratized in terms of where we're getting our inspiration from and what's actually driving our interest in kind of searching for the next new thing for ourselves. It's this kind of big shopping ecosystem that's driving our purchase habits more than ever, not just brand out advertising. And from this, we know that brands need to remain agile, look to social and see how users are repurposing products, trends, and kind of really tapping into that as well. So behavior here, you know, we're not just looking to kind of brands and kind of those top-down trends, but we're actually being much more influenced by bottom-up, by community, by creators, by the people around us on social as well. So to sum that up, two key behavioural shifts to really highlight here. Firstly, we're moving from going shopping to being in that always-on shopping mode. And secondly, we're really getting trends and inspiration from more sources than ever, with this behaviour fueling trends to move that flywheel and move faster than ever before as well. So I will hand back to Essie, who will wrap us up on social implications.
Brill, thank you. So finally, we've got our macro movements, our behavioral shifts. So what are the social implications? So how do the behavioral shifts kind of manifest on social, and how have social platforms adapted to those shifts as well? So what we already know and what Emily has been telling us is, yes, social media has very much kind of disrupted the purchase journey. There's much more room for this browsing behavior, spontaneous discovery, inspiration. And we no longer necessarily follow that kind of traditional path of just going shopping in store. And this is from a recent Vogue, Publicist, and TikTok white paper that came out earlier this year, which is a great read as well. And they said that every moment on a social platform is now an opportunity for conversion. And at the same time, authentic creativity is key to attracting and retaining the audience's attention. And I thought these two terms were interesting to kind of compare and look into, because if every social platform becomes a conversion opportunity, that means that all of our content needs to be able to sell. And yes, social has always very much been that shop window, but now you can literally buy directly from that window. However, then when thinking about how we're going to grasp our audience's attention, we need more than that pure kind of sales messaging. So we need that authentic creativity piece here. So I think it poses a slight kind of dichotomy here with these two things. So I wanted to delve into them a little bit deeper. So I think often when we think of conversion, we think of the funnel as a path to purchase. And I know there's been a lot of conversation recently in the industry about funnels. You know, some say it might be a hexagon these days. So not going to go into that right now. But I think it's good to kind of remind ourselves of the messiness of the purchase journey, which the tweet here on the right-hand side does brilliantly. Comparing these two kind of roller coasters, the one that's very straightforward on the left, that's kind of the more traditional funnel, versus the slightly messier, more realistic look on the right-hand side. And I think from a social perspective, the reality is that a great TikTok, for example, could do all the jobs on the left-hand side roller coaster here, because social does mean kind of discovery, research, and purchase can all happen at the same time. But I think the tweet kind of also reminds us of the importance of building in those multiple different brand touch points across social platforms to then nudge our consumers towards a purchase in all of this mess that is on the right-hand side here. And what we're really looking at here is, I guess, the collapse of the funnel as we know it. So the collapse of this very direct, straightforward funnel and turning into something that might look slightly more chaotic at the start. However, social commerce isn't really the only thing or the only benefit that social offers when it comes to shopping, because we know that social is and has always been this channel for self-expression. Yes, that has changed over time. So we don't talk about our breakfasts on Facebook publicly as we used to. It's a completely different kind of mindset on TikTok now, for example. But we have to kind of still understand the impact and influence of social on people's identity, and then how people perform their identity on these different channels. So this Dolly Parton meme a couple of years ago maybe, triggered everyone to really copy that meme, because everyone that knew that it was true. And I think when it comes to retailers in particular, you know that your customers kind of craft and curate different versions of them online on different social channels. So social is almost the stage for brands. And content that they then provide are the different props for people to use as well. And they're really these props for self-expression. And I think it's a really interesting concept of when we think about self-expression as a whole, there's no more this like a difference between IRL and URL, because there's just life. Given the fact that most people spend 5+ hours a day on their phones and are always second screening, as Emily mentioned, social is just kind of another part of our overall identity. They're not kind of separate things anymore. So then for a retailer, every single purchase is kind of this opportunity to exercise that identity through social content as well. So when we are creating content, I think it's really important that we consider its role in communicating our customers' identity as well. So pulling that all together, looking at the macro movements, behavioral shifts, and finally the social implications. So yes, we're seeing this collapse of the funnel, with social now being able to offer this kind of space for discovery, inspiration, but then also that conversion. But equally, we're also seeing social more and more as the stage for self-expression, as our kind of physical and virtual identities tend to collide, and the URL becomes IRL and the other way around. So hopefully that gave you a good understanding of the kind of evolving landscape and what we found interesting about it. And I'm going to hand back over to Emily to start looking at part 2. So how do brands then actually need to adapt?
Amazing. Yeah, so now we've got a really good picture of the overall landscape, behaviours and implications for that. It's now time for the bit that I'm sure everyone is really here for. It's how we actually need to take action on all of these things, and what do brands actually need to do in light of all of this. So to go through this, we've picked out 3 key focuses. So first we have, we want to be fueling that browsing behaviour. We know that that's something that we're all doing all the time. So how are we making everything shoppable? Secondly, community commerce. How do brands need to combine that shopping, entertainment, and community kind of buckets to actually drive purchase? And lastly, crafting in context. How we need to adapt to different channels, and why is this so important, particularly for shopping? So starting with the first, so how do brands need to be fueling our always-on browsing behaviour to be driving purchase in that really social first and native way? So firstly, we know that shopping is not a separate activity. We know that we always save posts, add to basket to buy later, share products, etc. We are in that always-on shopping mode. Secondly, even when we're not actively shopping, we're almost always open to discovering new products. We're always browsing. And that means there's ever more opportunity to integrate shoppable products into content and make everything sort of truly full funnel. So the brand action here is making everything shoppable, as you might expect. But the key thing here is doing it in a way that feels native and social first. It's not just pushing product at the expense of all other activity. It's actually integrating product into your content, into your activity, into ways that tap into those always on shopping mindsets and nudge shoppers towards purchase in a way that feels, you know, native and integrated, not really kind of in your face and salesy. So really, shoppable everything is what we want to achieve here. And with the ever sort of increasing world of social commerce in this very chaotic slide, this is getting ever more possible. Ed already said that social commerce is truly on fire, and that is very, very true. And it's been one of the biggest platform evolutions of the last sort of couple of years, really, and it is expanding every single day. So I'm not going to go into huge detail on kind of the exact tactical ways to kind of activate this. We've touched on this in more detail in our full funnel event a little while ago. Would recommend rewatching that if you missed out. But to make the most of these features, as I've said, it's not just about integrating them into product content, it's having it across the funnel. So I've got a couple of examples of kind of both sides of the coin here, from the always on activity that is kind of more driving that immediate purchase, to kind of more top of the funnel, bigger executions, and something that's a bit more innovative. So firstly, I've picked out this really good example from H&M. It is one of many, it's worth saying. But how do you make kind of always on in-feed content super shoppable and sort of super native as well? We know that social has really collapsed that funnel, as Essie touched on. So this post particularly does a really good job of kind of bridging that gap between discovery and purchase and making it super seamless. So, you know, this particular post here is drawing on a social trend as well, this 70s kind of vibe, this 70s look, and H&M have really taken it and run with it and shown how people can reimagine this using their products. They're not trying to tell people what's fashionable, they're actually taking what people already think is fashionable and are looking to purchase, and showing how they can do that in the context of their brand. And they've used, and it is a reel, yes, right. They've used, reels, which is great for discoverability as well. They've fully tagged products, product codes are in the comments, and all the products are linked through. So it is a really, really seamless purchase journey. So this really does show they understand how their brand is going to fit into trends. They've taken it from social and they've really adapted this to the platform really, really well. So I thought this was a really strong example of always on shopping content. So at the other end of the scale, getting a bit more innovative here, we have Shoppable AR. So you may have seen this has been kind of talked about a fair bit, but Gucci, industry leaders really on jumping on platform innovations and creating that kind of brilliant social first content that really does sell. So this is one of the first AR campaigns with Snapchat using virtual try on. So users could use the Snapchat reel and see the shoes, the Gucci shoes on their feet kind of in real life. This is kind of enabled via a lens that they could then go through to purchase as well through a shop now button. It was designed to really reduce returns rates. So trying on shoes is obviously very difficult online. So this was really kind of trying to address that customer problem. But it was really effective in terms of getting that kind of top level reach as well. This was something very innovative and something consumers really bought into, but it also was aiming to convert as well. It's not just a gimmick. Snapchat campaigns, as they report, that use AR lenses see a 2.5 times higher action intent lift compared to action driving campaigns without that AR filter in there. Just worth mentioning quickly, virtual try-on, we may see this or kind of interpret this as just kind of a pandemic occurrence, but actually we've seen, you know, brands from, you know, IKEA, Bolle, Farfetch, Prada, Nike, all investing in this. So while it's kind of early stages and feels quite innovative at the moment, the direction is definitely pushing towards this. And we know that overarching consumer problem of finding clothes that suit you, finding clothes that fit online is really, really tricky. So this is kind of an innovative tech solution to that core consumer problem. And it's something that we see as, you know, growing as a key concern for you know, the future as well. So AR here to stay. So to sum up, fueling the browse, making everything shoppable, 3 key takeaways here. Firstly, optimizing for that always on shopping behavior and integrating product across your funnel, tagging products, making sure that you're not just looking to product content to drive purchase, but that bigger awareness content too, and using social commerce to drive that always on effectiveness and innovation as well. So I'll hand back to Essie for number 2.
Thanks very much. So next, looking at community commerce. So if social commerce, as Emily explained, it is the kind of commerce mechanics and tactics on social media. So there's different formats that she's shown you as well. Community commerce is a type of social commerce, but it sits at the kind of intersection of community shopping and entertainment. And I believe that with the kind of right approach, brands can very much seamlessly fit into this community commerce experience. And what we're seeing is that those who are actually willing to test and have started testing these mechanics are reaping the rewards already. So would recommend kind of, as we go through them, thinking about how your brand could start understanding community commerce and getting into it. So, and at the kind of heart of community commerce sit creators. So they're the ones who hold the kind of relationships to their community and are very well versed in entertainment and what people want to see from them. So really, they are the perfect way in. They're also a great way to localize any kind of experiences as well, which is brilliant. And Shopify's director of product, Amir Kabara, he actually referred to them as the next gen entrepreneurs. And Shopify are very much on this journey to kind of give creators the kind of different tools that they need to do these multi-channel commerce experiences, whether that is something that happens on Spotify, where Shopify have just recently done a partnership with, or whether it's somewhere like TikTok, where they obviously have launched this live shopping experience a couple of months back. I Saw It First is a brilliant brand in UK who have been kind of making the most of the TikTok live shopping experience so far, and really been utilizing creators to kind of power their shopping offering, but with that side of entertainment as well. So they run weekly kind of shoppable lives on TikTok, giving discounts, exclusive offers, and all of it's hosted by these lovely creators to kind of make sure they're bringing in their community as well. So really building this community to shop with and not just sell to. What this looks like for one of our clients, M&S. So what they use is to use a really kind of layered, effective mix of creators, talents, and insiders, they call them. So people who actually work at M&S. And this really interesting way of kind of thinking about how we can layer these different creators to both entertain and then sell to their respective communities as well. And I think there's huge potential for brands to kind of engage their audiences as they congregate around these particular different interest groups. So really understanding how you can use different creator groups to tap into those different audience interests as well. Netflix is brilliant at the community commerce side of things, especially when it comes to extending the kind of community conversation into merch. So in the past year, Shopify has built out their kind of Netflix's in-house shopping platform, as you can see here on the right-hand side. And what it allows them to do is to really extend the world of the stories to their fans, whether it's apparel, toys, immersive events, all of that stuff, really building that unique Netflix shopping experience experience as well. And I think what's so special about Netflix is that they hold so many of these fan communities. So there's endless possibilities for creating merchandise and kind of shoppable experiences as well. And talking about shoppable experiences, a brilliant example from Gucci again. So in May this year, they organized this virtual 2-week art installation on Roblox, who are a kind of a gaming platform. And it was this fantastical kind of Gucci garden to wander through. It was designed by their creative director. And what they did is that they had this virtual garden, which is here on the bottom left, and it was opened at the same time with a physical garden in Florence, which is on the top left-hand side. Sorry, bottom left is virtual. Can't even hardly tell the reference. So good. Essentially, the Roblox kind of platform, it tends to offer virtual experiences and these gaming experiences, but users can also buy digital items such as clothing on there as well. Obviously, platforms like Roblox, they make money from in-game purchases, but they also offer brands a route to kind of tap into this new, often younger audiences as well. And I think what's important to note here that as kind of futuristic as this avatar here looks on the right-hand side, it's really not. You know, it ties back into our idea of our kind of physical selves merging into our digital personas as well. So it's very much something that will be happening. So very quick top line learnings from here. So live streaming is very much a key driver of shoppable media already, and it shortens the kind of traditional funnel because it allows us to, drawing people from the entertainment angle, but then allows us to buy them on the shop as well. We can use kind of these layers of creators to get access to different interest groups. And it's very much time to start preparing for virtual experiences being the future of shopping as well.
Amazing. So lastly, how do we need to be adapting our content and our activity across channels, and what does this look like for shopping particularly? So we obviously know we need to adapt everything for different social channels. That is not news, but when it comes to how users shop, it's all the more important. So shopping content, it really needs to be weaving into your ecosystem kind of seamlessly, and needs to flex and kind of adapt to what those different channel mindsets, audience behaviors, and kind of needs are. So what works somewhere, what works on TikTok won't necessarily be working for you on Pinterest in the same way. So I'm going to touch on 2 different ways that we need to adapt. Firstly, audience mindsets, and then the content itself. So audience mindsets is just a really, really interesting one. So I've picked out 2 kind of examples from opposite ends of the spectrum almost. You've got TikTok and Pinterest. So TikTok, we know, drives impulse purchases. It only takes 10 to 15 seconds to introduce, millions of people to a product and then convince them to buy it. I can see we're tight on time, so I won't talk too much about this particular example, but a really good example for Maybelline and their Sky High mascara. This drove absolutely massive reach. They engaged really closely with a community of creators, and then this kind of influenced people to, test the mascara for themselves, and was absolutely, it went completely viral. I think it's got 400 million views or something on the hashtag now, just for a mascara that costs $8.99, which was just a really great way of driving that kind of virality using a platform that people are very primed to make those impulse purchases. On the right hand side, we've got Pinterest, which is built around a completely different behavior, which is planning for future purchases, planning for what's coming down the line. And we know that 90% of pinners are looking for purchase inspiration on the platform particularly. And their kind of frame of kind of looking and planning is they start much earlier than they would on traditional search. So when you're looking to adapt, for Pinterest versus TikTok, you'll be looking to tap into those behaviors early, kind of getting kind of ahead of the game. Whereas TikTok will be much more around, driving impulse purchases, getting people excited and kind of driving that kind of snowball effect. So it's almost kind of opposite ends of the scale there. So adapting to those different audience behaviors for your platforms is super important. Secondly, we've got more in terms of the content and what content looks like. So again, using M&S, one of our clients here as the example. On the left-hand side, you've got that more kind of behind the scenes backstage version of this beauty content for TikTok, obviously. And then on the right-hand side, it's a more polished version, more kind of shop window for Instagram. This was a carousel, I believe. We know there's a crossover between the 2, so especially going more lo-fi on Instagram, especially with Reels. But we know that this needs to flex, and kind of the overall creative needs to adapt to what people will expect to see and what will feel native on every platform as well. So by adapting your approaches, you can, capture the planners on Pinterest, the kind of more aspirational audiences on Instagram, and, the more backstage kind of creative vibes on TikTok as well. And it's important to say that users want this to be the case. They want more opportunities to shop. This graph here, shows 78% of people like the option of clicking on products, buying them there and then, and around 70% like that convenience. I think there should be more of these opportunities going forwards. And serving this content differently in different places will, boost that effectiveness of your content and drive more people to purchase as well. And done right, we love this phrase, this is what you want to be creating, a huge sticky ecosystem, which is just lovely. We want to be adapting across channels, tapping into opportunities, and really changing how we're showing up in terms of shopping and kind of adapting to those behaviours as well. So this is really bringing together everything that we've just spoken about, so community, making everything shoppable, and adapting across platforms to create that big ecosystem, creating scale and layers, and creating something that consumers can't really help but be browsing. So this is kind of just 3 key points to sum all that up. So adapting for channels we know is really important, but particularly for shopping, it needs to be reflecting consumer mindsets with everything that you create and kind of the audience mindset that you're going after, adapting more than just your specs, adapting your whole approach, and using channels to create that ecosystem, which builds scale in layers as well. Back to you, Essie.
Thank you. Where we have thrown a lot at you over the last 30, 40 minutes or so. It's a very quick summary before we finish off here. So in terms of when we are looking at the shopping experience and social implications of it, we moved from a space where those two are very separate. So the consumer mindset is going shopping for something specific and simply buying things online. There's very little overlap in that social space, to now being in a space where we have this always on shopping and browsing mentality on social, powered by social commerce, to then in the future being in a space where that overlap is blurred almost completely, powered by tech, AR and VR, as Emily has shown us here as well. So just a very quick, I guess, those 3 key actions for brands. First of all, fueling the browse, so optimizing for always on shopping behavior, making everything shoppable. Secondly, community commerce, so boundaries between the community, shopping and entertainment are very much blurring, and creators are at the heart of kind of hosting this shopping experience. And then finally, crafting for channels, so adapting your approach and creating that sticky ecosystem. That's all from us, handing us back over to Ed.
Brill, thank you very much, Essie. Thank you, Emily. That was, I think we can all agree, that was absolutely fascinating, and you whipped through an absolutely vast amount of content. I'm aware that we've hit 46 minutes past already, so we've already gone over time. So I won't field any questions. Please just drop us an email, shout@bornsocial.com. We often get loads of questions through our sessions. We don't have time, so please just send us an email to the website, and we're happy to send some answers back, or even booking calls if things are really, really interesting. One last note from me: we're going to be hosting another event in November and December. We always try and keep them the last week of the month, so please be looking out, and we'll be sending round invites to the next event. If you signed up to this event, you will be on our mailing list now, so we'll be sending over a recording of today's session where you can see the slides. You can see a question just coming about that, and of course we'll also be sending invites to the next event. So until then, thank you all very much. Have a lovely Thursday morning, afternoon, evening, and we'll see you all soon.